Hi, my name is LaTrinda Knighton, and now that you have your Universal Screener reports, I want to give you a little guidance and some suggestions on how you can use those reports and that data to inform instruction on your campus and in your teachers' classrooms. So, as a reminder, this school year, the math department administered the Universal Screener tool for number sense from Forefront Education in grades kindergarten through sixth grade. So, as a reminder, what are the purposes of that tool? So, it can help teachers to collect data to make informed decisions about student learning, can help teachers identify specific standards to help students enrich or accelerate their learning. We can also use it to provide guidance for collaborative planning or PLC conversations, and to help teachers determine focus areas for professional development offerings, and possibly to create common guidelines for students in mathematics. For the kindergarten through sixth grade number sense screeners, students were presented with grade level specific tasks. So, in most instances, for the fall task, this content was actually aligned to a previous grade level, with the exception of kindergarten. And so, our purpose was finding out a student's readiness for on grade level content. As students are administered the other screeners, other times during the school year, those will be aligned specifically to on grade level content only. So, over the course of the next couple of screens, I'm going to scroll through just to show you the names of the actual task that students were assessed on in each grade from kindergarten through sixth grade. And as you take a look at those, I want to provide you with a little additional information about that. With the exception of kindergarten, each of these tasks is aligned to a standard. First and above, most tasks are aligned to a previous grade level standard, and then there's also the alignment to the on grade level standard. And so the purpose of this is to get that foundational information to see if students are exhibiting readiness for on grade level content. But because our goal is to make sure that students are engaged in on grade level content and classroom activities, you also have the aligned standard for that grade level mentioned as well to go with each task, so that teachers know what content you're building up understanding for. So let's take a look at the reports. So there are two types of reports that you would have received for your Universal Screener fall data. So the first thing we want to do is call attention to our little score area that shows us the four different colors. So for each screener, depending on the number of points that each grade level's tasks were worth, because students had differing number of questions depending on the grade level, the tasks are divided among four proficiency bands. So well below basic, basic, and proficient. So this is a snapshot overview of a school grade level report. So let's take a look at that actual report. So what you're looking at is actual real data from one school here in our district. I've removed all the identifying characteristics except the grade level, the region, and of course the questions. So for every grade level on your campus where students were assessed, you have a tab for each grade level. So this is an elementary school that has K-5, so there's a tab for kindergarten through fifth grade. If you only have middle school on your campus, you only have sixth grade data, because the number sent screeners were only administered for grades sixth grade on the middle school campus. So for each grade level, you have data for every question that was assessed. You have the student's total score, and it's color coded so that it matches those performance bands. So you get a picture of where that grade level, is scoring depending on those proficiency bands. And so let's go to third grade because we're going to look at some things specifically. So let's talk about a couple ways that we can use these grade level reports. So in addition to just giving you an overall picture of all the students at that grade level and a picture of where they perform based on their proficiency band, which is in this far right column, there are a couple other things you can do. So for example, remember, you will have student names on your reports and homeroom teacher names as well. Here, I just removed the student name and I put student A here, for example, because one of the things I can do is I can read this report horizontally. So for every student in third grade, I'm going to look at student A, and I see the student A is here in row 3, and I want to see how this student A performed on each of those questions. So I can see that student A does have some challenges. This was very early in the school year, so this data could look very different if we were looking at it right now. And so this student scored well below basic. So one of the things you'll notice that for those questions that pose a challenge for students, meaning those questions where students scored a 1 because that was the lowest score that a student could receive on a task, we did highlight those in red. And so one of the reasons for doing that, because in addition to looking to see how an individual student performed and looking to see the overall performance of every child in a grade level, also looking at where you see the red, it gives you an idea of which specific task or which questions possibly pose a challenge for students. So one of the things I encourage you to note as I scroll through, for example, look at question 2, where there's appeared to be a lot of red, that even though some students scored in the proficient band, so we notice that questions 1, 2, and 4, and even question 8 posed a challenge even for students who exhibited readiness for on-grade level content. So as a teacher, that's going to give me some idea of what are some prerequisite skills that maybe my students came into the beginning of the year a little fuzzy on. What are some things I can do to help provide some scaffolding of that content possibly? What are some things I can use when we're using the on grade level content? What are some things I can do to help bridge that gap to make sure they're making that connection from those foundational things that build on that content? Because I want to make sure that I help solidify this content for all of my students. So I really want to go back and look at those questions, look at those tasks, and look at those things specifically. And so you'll notice there are a couple of questions, question 2 and question 4, I want you to note specifically, because as we look at the individual report, we're going to talk about some ways that we can use this to really advance the learning of the entire class. So let's go back to our presentation. And so the second type of report that you would have received are the individual student reports. So again, this is just a snapshot of an individual student report. So for every child on your campus who was screened with a universal screener, you should have received an individual report such as this. And so it has the student's name, the homeroom teacher's name. But what I love about this is for each of these individual reports, you have the question, so you know the task that they were given. You have that standard it was aligned to, because remember, for grades 1 and above, if applicable, it's aligned to that prior grade level standard. But you also find out what current grade level standard is related to that. And this is important because for the majority of our students, those current grade level standards that are aligned to the tasks that they had, our students have already had that instruction in that content already this school year. So we should see some very different results for student performance on tasks such as this based on them having had instruction in those areas. But let's scroll through a little bit. And here I just took a sample of the third grade students from that same school's reports, but I just took out the identifying features, but I took one report at each performance level. And so as you take a look, and you can see that on the student report, they also have their overall performance band, But at the bottom, there's some hyperlinked activities that we're going to dive into a little bit deeper. I want you to take a look at question 10 and notice as I scroll through the different score reports that this question happens to be a challenge for students at each proficiency band for this particular subset of students. So all of the students scored a 1, which was the lowest score possible for this, even those students who were proficient. And I point this out because there are lots of things we can use this as a tool to inform instruction. So for example, the student who is proficient, not only can I look at this student's score and I can think of ways to accelerate or enrich this student's learning, but I also may want to go back and see this student did well. They got the highest score possible for task 9, which was a decomposed 13 task. But when they were asked to do the same thing in a different way, so obviously the task was taken to a higher level, this student got the lowest score possible. So maybe this understanding was not quite solidified at that time. So that's where these hyperlinked activities come into play. So for each of those things that were assessed, we've given you some sample activities and resources that can be used with students to support their understanding of that content. So some of the activities are activities such as this, which is an NCTM digital activity, which is something that students can do individually. So it can be assigned to be used in a station. It can be assigned to be used at home for a home learning activity, or the teacher can actually use it in a small group setting for students who all need some support in this area, and then allow students to work independently once they've been exposed to the content. Some of the activities that are hyperlinked are actually instructional tasks. So here you have a learning task for students that they can complete, but notice that there are materials for the teacher to use, such as a whiteboard, markers, and chart paper. So it's an instructional task that could be used in a small group setting for students. So there's lots of variety, lots of different things here. And there's guidance for teachers as for additional activities, additional things for support. So when I'm looking at one of my students, such as this student who scored well below basic, I'm going to really dive into the things that are here and look for some things that I can use as an intervention. I can use in my small group instructional table and then build on it for some independent practice for students as well. So let's go back to question 2 and question 4 that I talked about earlier that seem to pose a challenge for students at a variety of proficiency bands. This is where we might, as a grade level, go in and take a look to see where are these standards where students are having some difficulty? What content is that related to? And what are some things that we can do as a grade level to support that? For example, question 4 is one of those questions that posed a challenge for several students, even though this student who was well below basic actually was a student who did well on that. But when we look at that overall grade band report, we see that question 4 shows up throughout different proficiency bands as one that was a challenge for some students. But notice, this is new content because there wasn't a prior grade level standard that was a scaffold for that. So this also is a standard that was addressed in our first 2 to 3 modules in 3rd grade. So students probably have some proficiency in that they didn't have at the beginning of the school year. When I take a look at standards such as the number 2, which happen to be place value, and we know that sometimes our students do have some challenges related to place value, because that seemed to be a question that was a challenge for a wide variety of students in 3rd grade at this school, I would suggest that the 3rd grade teachers go back, look at where that standard is addressed in the 2nd grade curriculum. How many times does it show up? How is it presented? And then have some cross grade level discussions with the teachers in 2nd and 3rd grade to find out that they notice their students having some struggle with that content before in last school year. And what are some things that the two grade levels can do together to solidify students' understanding of that concept? Because it seemed to be something at the beginning of the year that across the different proficiency bands seem to provide a challenge for a wide variety of students. So this is a perfect opportunity to have those cross grade level discussions. And maybe that might be something that that particular set of teachers may decide at second and third grade. Let's do some professional development around that area. So how can we help support our students with that understanding? So as I said, one of the beauties of this report is not just having that individual data for each student, it's actually having this hyperlinked set of resources that you can use with students, with parents, with teachers to really provide students with some support and some additional learning around those concepts. So this concludes our quick look at some of the suggestions for ideas that you can use to support students in their learning around your universal screener data. But as always, if you have any questions or you want some further guidance or just want to reach out and talk to us, here's the list of everyone in the math department along with our email addresses. So please feel free to reach out to us. And at this time, on behalf of the math department, I definitely want to thank you for everything you do to support our students, our teachers, and everything you do to support mathematics learning in East Patmos Parish. So thank you so much, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions about how to use the Universal Screener data reports.